Why are you here? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Why were you born at this time, in this generation, with the gifts and abilities inside you? Listen to me carefully. You were not born to struggle through life, barely making it, just trying to survive. You were born to rule. You were created to dominate. You were designed to exercise authority in the earth. But the problem is, most people don't know who they are. The greatest tragedy in life is not death. It is living without purpose. It is existing without understanding your divine assignment. When God created mankind, He didn't create followers. He didn't create slaves. He created rulers. But somewhere along the way, we lost our identity. We became victims instead of victors. We settled for mediocrity instead of dominion. My question to you today is, who stole your crown? Who told you that you were born to suffer instead of reign? Today, I've come to wake you up. You were born to rule. And if you don't believe me, let's go back to the beginning. When God created you, He had only one intention: dominion. You were not created to struggle. You were not designed to be controlled by circumstances. You were never meant to live under the weight of fear, anxiety, and failure. You were created to rule. You were given authority. You were designed to exercise dominion over the earth. But if that is true, why are so many people living in defeat? Why do so many live like slaves to their problems instead of rulers over their situations? Why do people live beneath their potential, afraid to step into their purpose? The answer is simple. They don't know who they are. Ignorance is the greatest weapon the enemy uses against you. Not sickness, not poverty, not opposition. Ignorance. Because the moment you forget who you are, the moment you doubt your identity, you surrender your authority, the greatest tragedy in life is not death. It is living without knowing why you were born. It is waking up every morning with no sense of purpose, no vision, no direction. It is accepting a life of survival when you were created for dominion. From the beginning, God made His purpose for you very clear. In Genesis 1:26, He said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion." That means you were designed to function like God in the earth. You were created to reflect His nature. You were born to operate with His authority. You were meant to beg life for opportunities. You were meant to create them. You were never meant to follow the systems of this world. You were meant to establish kingdom order. You were never meant to be ruled by circumstances. You were meant to dictate the outcome. But let me tell you what happened. Over time, we lost our dominion mentality. We started thinking like slaves instead of rulers. We let the world define our identity instead of listening to the one who created us. And when you forget your identity, you lose your authority. You start reacting to life instead of commanding life. You start letting fear make decisions for you instead of faith. You start believing the lies that tell you you're not good enough, you're not capable, you don't have what it takes. And the moment you believe the lie, you surrender the truth. A lion does not question if it is a lion. It doesn't wake up in the morning doubting if it has power. It doesn't ask the jungle for permission to roar. It simply knows who it is, and because it knows, it rules. The lion doesn't have to be the biggest animal in the jungle. It doesn't have to be the tallest, the smartest, or the fastest. What makes the lion the king of the jungle is its mentality. And I came to tell you today, if you don't change the way you think, you will never walk in dominion. If you think like a victim, you will live like a victim. If you think like a failure, you will act like one. But if you start thinking like a ruler, you will start walking like one. When God placed Adam in the garden, He gave him everything he needed to rule. He gave him land, resources, and the power to subdue the earth. But do you know what God never gave Adam? A chair. God never gave Adam a finished product. Because kings don't wait for things to be given to them, they create. Kings don't beg for resources, they multiply what is in their hands. God gave Adam dominion, but it was up to Adam to activate it. And that is the same for you today. You have been given dominion, but if you don't activate it, you will live as if you don't have it. You don't need someone to give you permission to succeed. God already gave you dominion. You don't need to wait for someone to open a door. God already gave you the power to build your own. You don't need to sit around hoping for opportunities. God already placed gifts, ideas, and potential inside of you that are waiting to be unlocked. The problem is not that you lack power. The problem is that you have not yet recognized the power you already have. So the question today is, will you take your place? Will you reclaim your dominion? Will you walk in the authority that God has given you? Or will you continue to live beneath your calling, beneath your destiny, beneath your God-given potential? It's time to rise. It's time to take your crown. It's time to walk in your authority, because you were born to rule. When God created man, he gave him something no other creature on earth received: dominion, authority, power, the ability to rule and govern the earth as a representative of the King of Heaven. Man was placed in an environment where everything was provided, where he lacked nothing, where his position was clear: a ruler, not a slave. Adam was not confused about his identity. He did not wake up every morning questioning his purpose. He did not live in fear, insecurity, or doubt. He knew who he was. He was born to rule. But something happened, something dangerous happened, something so devastating that it caused man to lose his power, his confidence, his authority, his dominion. Sin entered the world. And when sin entered, dominion exited. When disobedience took over, authority was lost. When Adam and Eve disobeyed God, they did not just commit a mistake. They surrendered their rulership. They handed over their power. They allowed an enemy, a deceiver, a liar, to take what was rightfully theirs. And you know what is worse than losing dominion? Forgetting that you ever had it. The enemy's greatest strategy is not to steal your gifts, not to block your opportunities, not to take away your potential. His greatest strategy is to erase your memory of who you really are. If he can make you forget, if he can blind you to your true identity, then you will live beneath your calling. You will accept defeat as normal. You will allow fear to control you. You will let circumstances tell you what to do instead of taking authority over them. Because when you don't know who you are, you don't know what you have. Adam and Eve were not cursed to work because they sinned. Work was always part of their assignment. But after they lost dominion, their work became painful. Their effort became a struggle. What once was easy became difficult. They were created to rule the earth, but instead the earth began to rule them. And that is the same reality many people are living in today. Instead of taking dominion over money, money controls them. Instead of ruling over fear, fear dictates their decisions. Instead of walking in confidence, they live in hesitation because they forgot their original position. Do you know why lions don't fear in the jungle? It is not because they're the biggest animals. It is not because they're the fastest. It is because they have never been told that they are not kings. A lion does not wake up in the morning and question its authority. It does not ask permission to roar. It does not wait for other animals to validate its leadership. It simply knows who it is. But what happens if a lion is raised outside the jungle? What happens if a lion is born in captivity? What happens if a lion grows up in a cage surrounded by chains with no exposure to the wild? That lion will grow up believing it is weak. It will live in fear. It will behave like a victim even though it was born to rule. And this is what has happened to so many people. They were born to rule, but they have been raised in a mindset of captivity. Society has placed them in a cage of doubt. Culture has programmed them to think small. Religion has told them to be quiet, to play it safe, to just survive instead of thrive. And so they live their entire lives like a lion in a cage, never realizing that the moment they decide to rise, the cage cannot hold them. But I have news for you. Jesus did not come to start a religion. He came to restore a kingdom. He did not come to make you religious. He came to give you back your crown. He came to return the dominion that was lost. He came to set the captives free. That means you no longer have to live in fear. You no longer have to accept defeat. You no longer have to walk around like a slave when you were created to reign. The cross was not just about forgiveness. It was about restoration. Jesus came to break the curse that made you forget your rulership. He came to tear down the stronghold of ignorance. He came to remind you of who you are. Because the moment you remember your identity, the moment you reclaim your dominion, the enemy loses his power over you. The only authority the enemy has is the authority you give him through ignorance. When you know who you are, you will stop bowing to fear. You will stop allowing problems to rule over you. You will stop making decisions based on insecurity. You will walk, talk, think, and live like a ruler. So the question is, do you remember who you are? Or have you allowed the world to make you forget? Have you surrendered your dominion without realizing it? Have you settled for survival when you were created to reign? The time for ignorance is over. The time for hesitation is over. The time for small thinking is over. It is time to take back your dominion. It is time to rise. It is time to walk in the authority that was given to you from the beginning. It is time to reclaim what was lost. It is time to rule again. When God created man, he gave him dominion, not over people, not over each other, but over the earth, over creation, over circumstances, over every environment he would step into. Dominion was never something man had to earn. It was given at birth. It was his inheritance. It was his right. It was his original design. But something happened along the way. Man abandoned his position, not because God took it away, but because he surrendered it, because he exchanged his authority for fear, his confidence for doubt, his rulership for survival. The greatest tragedy in life is not death. It is living without knowing your purpose. It is being alive but powerless. It is waking up every morning and allowing life to dictate how you feel, how you think, and how you move. But let me remind you today, you were never created to be a slave to life. You were created to rule it. You were not designed to be a victim of circumstances. You were not designed to beg for opportunities. You were not designed to fear the future. You were designed to command your environment. But do you know the greatest enemy of dominion? A powerless mindset. The enemy doesn't have to destroy you if he can keep you thinking small. He doesn't have to take away your gifts if he can convince you that you don't have any. He doesn't have to remove your potential if he can make you doubt it. Because the moment you stop believing in your authority, you stop using it. And the moment you stop using it, you lose the power to influence the world around you. Look at the children of Israel. They were delivered from Egypt, but Egypt was still inside of them. They were no longer slaves physically, but they were still thinking like slaves. They were free, but they didn't know how to walk in freedom. They had been promised dominion, but they were still begging for survival. Instead of stepping into the land that God had given them, they wandered in the wilderness, complaining, doubting, hesitating. Because they had the wrong mindset, and because of that, an entire generation died outside of their promise. Not because God failed them, but because they failed to see themselves as rulers. How many people today are wandering in life, living in circles, never advancing, never growing, never stepping into their destiny, not because they lack ability, but because they lack belief in their authority? How many people are waiting for permission to walk in what God has already given them? How many are asking for opportunities when God has already placed gifts inside of them that the world needs? The problem is not the environment, the problem is the mindset. Because the truth is, you will never walk in dominion if you don't first think like a ruler. A lion does not rule the jungle because it is the fastest animal. It is not the strongest, the tallest, or the smartest. It is not even the biggest. But what makes the lion the king of the jungle is its mentality. A lion thinks differently. A lion does not wait for permission. A lion does not question its place in the wild. It does not second guess its roar. It does not look in the mirror and wonder, am I really a ruler? It just knows. And because it knows, everything around it responds to its authority. The same is true for you. When you start thinking like a ruler, everything around you will begin to shift. When you start walking in your dominion, doors will begin to open. When you start commanding your environment instead of bowing to it, things will begin to align. That is why Jesus came, not just to redeem you from sin, but to restore your identity. He came to reintroduce you to yourself. He came to give you back the dominion that was lost. He came to break the chains, not just physical chains, but mental chains, emotional chains, generational chains, chains that have kept you from thinking like a ruler. He came to remind you that you are not a beggar, you are not a slave, you are not a failure. You are a ruler, you are a king, you are a queen. You were created to have dominion. So the question is, are you still thinking like a slave? Or have you renewed your mind to think like a ruler? Because if you don't change the way you think, you will never change the way you live. If you don't believe in your dominion, you will never walk in it. If you don't reclaim your authority, you will remain in the wilderness when you were meant to be in the promised land. The time for small thinking is over. The time for waiting is over. The time for hesitation is over. It is time to think like a ruler, walk like a ruler, and take your place. Because you were born to rule. When God created man, He did not give him religion. He did not give him rituals, traditions, or ceremonies. He gave him dominion. He gave him rulership. He gave him authority over the earth, over circumstances, over the systems of this world. But something happened. Something shifted. Instead of walking in dominion, man started walking in fear. Instead of ruling his environment, he became a slave to it. Instead of speaking with authority, he started doubting his own voice. And the question today is, why? Why do so many live beneath their calling? Why do so many accept defeat as normal? Why do so many bow to fear instead of standing in faith? The answer is simple. They have been conditioned to think like subjects instead of rulers. From birth, people are trained to follow systems, to obey limitations, to accept boundaries that were never placed by God. Society tells you how far you can go. Culture dictates what is possible for you. The world convinces you that you must fight, struggle, and beg for a position that was already given to you by the Creator. And so instead of ruling, people live in submission to things they were supposed to master. Look at Adam. When God placed him in the garden, He gave him everything he needed to function in His authority. But when Adam fell, the first thing he did was hide. He ran from the presence of God. He covered himself in shame. He was still made in God's image, but he no longer saw himself that way. And that is exactly what happens when you lose sight of your dominion. You hide. You shrink. You hesitate. You begin to question your ability, your worth, your power. You start looking at the world for validation instead of looking to the one who created you. And the moment you start looking at your environment instead of your assignment, you will always feel unqualified. That is why the greatest battlefield is the mind. If the enemy can control your thoughts, he can control your life. If he can convince you that you are powerless, he doesn't have to take your power, you will give it away. If he can make you believe that you are incapable, you will never step into what God has called you to do. If he can plant a seed of fear, you will live in bondage, even when you were designed for freedom. The war is not just external. The real war is in your mind. That is why Paul said in Romans 12:02, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Because if your mind does not change, your life will not change. If you do not start thinking like a ruler, you will never walk in dominion. If you do not start speaking with authority, you will never command your environment. You must renew your mind to align with your original design. You must reject every lie that tells you that you are weak, unworthy, or incapable. You must refuse to settle for a life of mediocrity when you were created for greatness. A lion raised in captivity does not know that it is a lion. It has the same power, the same ability, the same potential as any lion in the wild. But because it has been conditioned to live behind bars, it behaves like a prisoner. It does not roar, it does not hunt, it does not rule, not because it lacks the ability, but because it lacks the awareness. And so instead of ruling the jungle, it paces back and forth inside a cage that it has accepted as home. And many people today are just like that lion, caged by fear, caged by doubt, caged by the opinions of others, caged by failure, living inside a prison that only exists in their minds. But I came to tell you today, the cage is not locked. The door has been open this entire time. And the moment you decide to step out, the moment you decide to reject fear, to silence doubt, to break free from small thinking, you will realize that nothing was ever truly holding you back. Jesus came not just to set you free from sin, but to set you free from ignorance. He came to restore what was lost. He came to remove the blindfold that kept you from seeing who you truly are. He came to give you back your crown. That means you no longer have to live as a slave when you were created to rule. You no longer have to accept defeat when you were designed for victory. You no longer have to shrink in fear when you were called to walk in boldness. The time for hesitation is over. The time for waiting is over. The time for excuses is over. It is time to walk in dominion. It is time to rise. It is time to take your place, because you were born to rule. Everything in life responds to authority. The earth was designed to obey the voice of a ruler. Creation was never meant to rule over man. Man was meant to rule over creation. That is why when Jesus spoke to the storm, it stopped. When he commanded sickness, it left. When he called forth Lazarus, the dead man got up. Not because Jesus performed magic, not because he was trying to impress people, but because he understood the power of dominion. And the same authority that he walked in is the same authority he restored to you. But the question is, are you using it? And one of the greatest tragedies is to have power and never use it. To have authority but live like a slave. To be given dominion but live under the control of circumstances. And yet, that is how many people live today. Instead of commanding life, they let life command them. Instead of ruling over fear, they let fear rule over them. Instead of shaping the environment, they let their environment shape them. And so they wonder why things don't change. They wonder why their prayers seem powerless. They wonder why they are stuck in the same cycles, repeating the same struggles, facing the same battles. But the truth is, you cannot exercise dominion if you don't believe you have it. Look at Adam. When he was in the garden, everything responded to his authority. The animals listened to him. The land produced for him. He didn't have to struggle. He simply had to speak. He named the animals and they accepted their identity. He walked in dominion and nothing resisted him. But when he sinned, when he disobeyed, something changed. He lost his confidence. He lost his boldness. He lost his position. And from that moment forward, instead of creation serving him, he began to struggle against it. The ground that once yielded to him now fought against him. The world that once responded to his authority now resisted him. Not because God took away his power, but because he gave it away. And this is where many people are today. They are living beneath their authority. They are allowing circumstances to dictate their future. They are waiting for things to change instead of commanding them to change. They are begging for what they already have access to. But I came to tell you today, it is time to take back your dominion. It is time to rise up and exercise the authority that God has given you. You were never designed to live in defeat. You were never created to struggle through life like a victim. You were born to rule. You were created to command. You were designed to speak to situations and see them shift. That is why Jesus didn't just come to forgive your sins. He came to restore your rulership. He came to give you back what was lost. He came to break the curse of ignorance that has kept people living in survival mode when they were meant to thrive. That means you don't have to live in fear anymore. You don't have to tolerate oppression anymore. You don't have to accept anything that is less than what God has promised you, because the moment you remember who you are, everything in your life will begin to align. A king does not beg for what already belongs to him. He does not ask for permission to rule. He does not hesitate when it is time to take dominion. He simply speaks, and his words shape his reality. That is why Solomon said in Proverbs 18:21, "Life and death are in the power of the tongue," because the words you speak are not just sounds, they are weapons. They create, they establish, they build, they destroy. And if you are not speaking in alignment with the authority you have been given, then you are allowing your environment to rule over you instead of ruling over it. The enemy is not afraid of people who go to church. He is not afraid of people who sing songs, quote scriptures, or attend religious gatherings. What he fears are people who know who they are, people who walk in dominion, people who refuse to bow to fear, people who speak with authority. Because when you walk in your God-given dominion, you become unstoppable. You become unshakable. You become a force that the enemy cannot contain. The time for silence is over. The time for hesitation is over. The time for waiting is over. It is time to take dominion. It is time to rise. It is time to speak with authority. Because you were not created to struggle. You were created to reign. You were not designed to beg. You were designed to command. You were not born to live in fear. You were born to rule. So take your place. Step into your authority and walk in the dominion that has been restored to you. Everything you need to rule is already inside of you. The power is in you. The authority is in you. The dominion is in you. But it will remain dormant until you decide to use it, until you reject fear, until you silence doubt, until you stand up and say, "I refuse to live beneath my calling. I refuse to accept anything less than what God has given me. I will walk in my dominion." Because life will not hand you your authority. You must take it. The enemy will not surrender territory. You must reclaim it. Your environment will not change unless you command it. Your future will not shift unless you step into it. The world is waiting for you to take your place. The kingdom is waiting for you to rise. The earth is groaning for the sons and daughters of God to rule again. No more excuses, no more waiting, no more looking back. The time is now. The time to think like a ruler, the time to speak like a ruler, the time to walk like a ruler, because you were born to rule. So go forth with boldness, walk in your authority, step into your destiny, and rule with the confidence of a king, with the wisdom of a leader, with the faith of a conqueror. Because you were never meant to live in fear. You were meant to reign. Good luck, and may you walk in your dominion every single day. Thank you.